Joseph Stalin was estimated to have been responsible for almost 10 million deaths, either by execution, imprisonment, or starvation. He's been described variously as a monster, a savior, and one of the most influential people of the 20th century. Whatever the case, Stalin was one of the most controversial leaders of the 20th century. When he died in 1953, Stalin had left an indelible mark on the Soviet Empire. He had gone from being the son of a humble Georgian cobbler to the ruthless dictator of 180 million people. Stalin took full advantage of his cult of personality to lead the Soviet Union to victory in World War II, before establishing itself as a Cold War superpower. There's no question that Stalin was both feared and respected by almost everybody around him. But was he actually liked? And if so, by who? And why, exactly? Well, like may not be the most accurate description of how Stalin's followers felt towards him. To like a person means having some awareness of and being attracted to some of their basic traits, whether they be kindness, courage, or humor. Stalin was hardly a gregarious soul and only engaged in friendly banter if there was an ulterior motive at play. However, his personality had little to do with his rise to power. Most people had no idea what he was like behind closed doors. To the average person on a Moscow street, Stalin was almost otherworldly. He was masterful at creating his own cult, and it was from this deity-like persona that millions of Soviets looked up to Stalin in awe, often ignoring his failings for the greater good. To this day, Stalin is still revered by many people in the former Soviet states. Russian President Vladimir Putin has made it no secret that he holds a deep respect for Stalin's leadership, especially during World War II. A recent poll of Russian people found that over half of the people thought Stalin was, quote-unquote, a great leader. Many of the people surveyed paid tribute to Stalin for transforming Russia from an agrarian society to an industrial machine. Stalin's leadership in World War II is another reason for his continued support amongst many Russians, although younger generations appear to remain somewhat indifferent. As the Soviet Union emerged victorious from the war, Stalin embarked on a nuclear program that would shape the course of the Cold War. This was at the height of his powers, and he was referred to as a universal genius, a shining sun, and perhaps most ironically, the staff of life. While leading Russia to victory over Germany in the World War was one of Stalin's finest moments, he's equally remembered for overseeing the deaths of millions of his fellow Soviets. During the Great Purge in 1937, almost 1 million people were executed on suspicion of being enemies of the state. Millions more are thought to have died through enforced labor, prison, starvation, and other executions, while Stalin was in charge. However, throughout the ruthless and paranoid persecutions that pervaded the Soviet Union under his rule, Stalin was still very much admired. Much of this can be attributed to the incredible power of his cult of personality. A cult of personality is when a leader's image is built up to an almost godlike status on the back of propaganda and manipulation of the media. The leaders are portrayed as heroic saviors of a nation, and they're often idolized and exalted, at least in public. Apart from Stalin, other famous examples include Chairman Mao in China, Adolf Hitler, and Kim Jong-un's reign in North Korea. The cult personality is often experienced under fascist regimes and dictatorships, with the persecution and immense suffering of any objectors being part of the process. When Stalin took over from Lenin, Russia and the Soviet states were ready for a strong leader. The people had been through a revolution and world war, and they were now looking for someone assertive to take the reins. Fittingly, Stalin's name means steel, and his imagery was not lost on the propaganda machine. After his 50th birthday in 1929, things truly started to ramp up. Stalin's stern image looked down benignly at people from posters, statues, and cinema screens. His virtues were lauded in books, music, plays, and of course, the newspapers. Although Stalin was quietly cynical of the near-hysterical hero-worshipping that his cult brought, he realized it was a handy tool in promoting communism. It was when Stalin first introduced his 5-year plan in 1928 that his cult status really began to take shape. He appealed to the masses by reminding them of Russia's struggles in the past and its backwardness. His 5-year plan was focused on the collectivization of agriculture and the mass development of industry. Stalin emphasized the importance of change, and he told Soviet citizens that we are 50 or 100 years behind the advanced countries. We must make good this distance in 10 years. Either we do it or we shall go under. This is what millions of Soviets had been waiting for, a leader with a clear vision and who was determined to make the Soviet Union great. And it wasn't just stirring speeches. Things were visibly changing. Factories, mines, power stations were being constructed, fuels were being extracted, steel was being produced, and manufacturing had become a key industry. In 1925, the city of Volgograd was renamed Stalingrad, in honor of Stalin defending it against the White Army in the Russian Civil War. Perhaps fittingly, the city of Stalingrad was to play a major role in World War II, for it was here that the Russians formed a siege to defeat the German army, setting up the Soviet to march into Berlin. If there was ever a time that Stalin was liked, this was it. The transformation ran into plenty of opposition, but they simply were disposed of. When millions of small lot farmers protested at the collectivization that took over their farms, they were either arrested or executed. Many starved to death. It's reasonable to assume that while many Soviets were no doubt aware of the suffering of their fellow citizens, they were also caught up in the growth of the economy and the unshakable determination of their new leader. By the late 1930s, the Soviet Union's industrial output was second only to the US. This was on the back of a revolution, world war, famine, and civil war. This only added to Stalin's ever-growing image as a glorious leader who had catapulted the Soviet Union into a position of global power. It was during the mid to late 1930s that Stalin also featured heavily in the media as the benefactor of children. He was photographed giving presents to children of various ethnicities, and banners could be seen hanging from doorways proclaiming, "Thank you, dear comrade Stalin, for a happy childhood." This sentiment was encouraged, and younger generations of Soviets were constantly reminded that until Stalin came along, it had been pretty tough going. At the end of World War II, the Soviet Union was now on par with the US, not just in terms of industrial output, but also in military capacity. The Soviet Union had expanded dramatically and had added Bulgaria, Romania, Hungary, Poland, and Eastern Germany, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania to its sphere of influence. Many Soviets were fiercely proud of what their empire had become, and those opposed had learned to keep their opinions to themselves. After all, the Great Purge of 1937 had seen Stalin and his supporters get rid of anyone thought to be opposed to his rule or supporters of his arch-rival Trotsky. At least 700,000 people are believed to have been executed, and the overall death toll of the Great Purge is estimated to be at over 1 million. As Russia entered the Second World War, many Soviet citizens had mixed feelings about Stalin's leadership. Although he had killed and imprisoned an unknown number of people, he was still the best candidate to lead Russia to victory against the despised Nazi Germany. And so, when Russia came out on top, many of Stalin's previous monstrosities were put to the back of people's minds, if only for the time being. Stalin had played a significant role in Russia's victory. He consulted with generals, he advised on tactics, and kept close the control of the battlefronts and war economy. An American ambassador who'd spent several years dealing with Stalin said that he held the Soviet Union together, and that Stalin, the war leader, was popular, not only with the Russian army, but the citizens as a whole. However, Stalin's horrific reign of terror on his own people added to the calamitous effects of his collectivization policy. It's impossible to overlook. No amount of carefully engineered propaganda could have made up for the devastating toll that Stalin's ruthlessness took on the Soviet people. Stalin died in 1953, and he was replaced by Nikita Khrushchev. Almost immediately, a policy of de-Stalinization began. Enforced labor camps were done away with, millions were released from the gulags, and the process to decentralize many of Stalin's institutions was underway. Khrushchev no doubt echoed the sentiments of many fellow Soviets when he spoke critically of Stalin's ruthless time in power. He said it was against the spirit of Marxism for one person to be elevated above others, and that it was wrong to transform him into a Superman possessing supernatural characteristics akin to that of a god. Today, the name Stalin still evokes strong opinions from people throughout the former Soviet Union. During his time in power, he was able to stir up many emotions, ranging from admiration and awe to plain contempt. But despite all of Stalin's accomplishments and victories, the most overriding emotion was undoubtedly fear.